My grandson told me to bury yourself in your trashy garden, you rotten hag. But he didn't know that. I knew Connor was behind me before I even turned. There was a certain careless rhythm in the way his sneakers scraped across my backyard, the backyard I had tended for decades, and then the thud of something hitting the ground near my feet. When I looked down, I saw a torn plastic bag spilling soda cans, greasy napkins, and half-eaten chips onto my shoes. Before I could fully take in the mess, his voice sharp, excited, meant for an audience cut through the cold Ohio air. Bury yourself in your trashy garden, you rotten hag. Go on. You love dirt so much you should live in it. He held his phone up like a weapon, broadcasting me to whoever cared to watch. I heard laughter coming from the device, the digital kind that feels colder than any real room could ever be. He did not wait for me to react. He never did. He threw another line toward me, this one louder, like he wanted the whole neighborhood to hear. You're nothing but dead weeds. Just die already. I kept my hands still at my sides. If I bent down, if I even flinched, it would thrill him. The boy I once held close enough to feel his heartbeat against mine now looked at me as if I were less than the trash he had just thrown. He angled his phone closer to my face, probably hoping for tears. But I had learned, painfully and slowly, that tears are something you must protect when you live among people who enjoy seeing them fall. About 200 words into his performance, he was joined by the familiar sounds of the sliding door behind me. I did not have to turn to know it was Kai and Melissa. Their presence had a weight to it, a heatless pressure that always seemed to settle on the back of my neck. They stood there the way people stand around a nuisance, not a relative. Kai crossed his arms and sighed like I was disappointing him simply by continuing to exist. Mom, if you did not provoke him, he would not talk like that. Just go inside and stop letting everything become a scene. Melissa's voice followed his, sweetly sour, made to sting. Old people love drama. She enjoys being the victim. Let her finish her moment. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I kept my eyes on the lavender near my feet, stems broken, blossoms crushed under the heel marks Connor had left behind. That lavender had been my quiet ritual for years. Jack used to say the scent made the world feel gentler, that even in hard times you could close your eyes and pretend the air was hugging you. After he passed, those small bushes became my way of keeping a promise to him, a promise that I would stay steady even if everything else around me shook. When Cy and Melissa stood behind Connor, watching him grin at his screen while letting strangers judge their grandmother like a circus exhibit, I felt a tight pull below my ribs. I did not show it. Pain that shows becomes a tool for people like them. I learned that too late, but I learned it well. Connor kicked another patch of lavender, not even looking down. When you die, he shouted, we will bulldoze this dump and sell the land. This is going to be my house, not yours. He said it with certainty, as if I had been a placeholder all along, something temporary, waiting to be cleared away. The truth is, I did not even feel shocked anymore. I just looked at him, at Kai, behind him, at Melissa, with that impatient tilt of her chin, and something inside me shifted quietly, but permanently. I was not thinking about the trash on my shoes, or the ground cold beneath my feet, or the phone lens capturing my humiliation. I was thinking about the repetition, the pattern, the years that led up to this moment. How people you raise can become people who see your kindness as weakness, your sacrifices as currency they are owed, and your age as an inconvenience. Kai rubbed his temples like he could not believe I was still standing there. Mom, please, do not make this worse. We are just trying to help you understand your limits. My son loved to talk about my limits, as if the woman who paid his debts, his first car, his first apartment, had somehow become a burden the moment she grew older. Melissa stood behind him, voice sweet but sharp, saying I liked attention whenever their cruelty was exposed. I bent down not to clean the trash they threw, but to touch the soil where Jack and I planted our first lavender bush. One crushed leaf between my fingers, and I could almost hear his voice reminding me that I was the one who held this home together. If he saw his family now, he would not be surprised. Cruelty does not arrive suddenly. It grows fed by entitlement, watered by resentment, until one day it stands in your yard kicking the only beauty you have left. I straightened and looked at Connor, memorizing the confidence with which he claimed he'd inherit a home he'd never respected. What he did not know was that nothing in this place would ever fall into their hands. People think resentment begins with a single fight. In truth, it grows slowly. I learned that working 2 jobs, raising Kai while Jack lay dying, pushing my son to succeed, never realizing those very sacrifices would become the foundation of his blame. Other kids get to go out, he would say. Other kids have parents who trust them. I always told Kai that trust is earned and opportunities are built, not handed out. I thought I was preparing him for life. He thought I was controlling it. Everything changed his senior year. He wanted a scholarship that would cover his dream university. I filled out the forms after a double shift, sorting hospital bills and fighting sleep. I missed one signature, one. When the rejection came, he stormed in shouting, "You ruined my future!" He did not want the truth, he wanted someone to blame, and I was closest. From then on, every favor he asked came coated in resentment. He forgot the years I carried our family and remembered only the mistake. Even when he later landed a construction job, nothing softened. His bitterness had become the only language he spoke. "Just sign it, Mom. Say you misreported something in the past. They will believe you. You're harmless." Harmless. That word told me everything he truly thought of me. I read the document. I saw what it implied, and I refused. I still remember how quickly he switched from pleading to fury. "You always choose your morals over your son," he shouted. "You never protect me. You never have." The irony cut deeper than Kai's accusations. I had spent my life protecting him, yet because I would not lie for him, he called me disloyal. When his company uncovered his deception and fired him, he rewrote the story. I was the mother who ruined everything. Melissa made it worse. She arrived already believing I judged her, and when I suggested they slow their spending, she twisted it into an insult. Every gentle reminder became criticism. She fed her bitterness into Kai, then into Connor, until my name became synonymous with burden in my own home. Connor grew up breathing their contempt like air. But the breaking point came with Emma, the bruised girl I brought in for safety. When Kai learned I sheltered her, he slammed the door so hard the frames shook, screaming that I cared more for strays than for him. "You bring street trash into our home? You care more about her than your own son." Melissa chimed in with a cold sneer. "People will think we're the same kind of trash." It did not matter that Kay had never gone hungry a day in his life. It did not matter that Emma needed safety. They decided that by helping her, I had betrayed them. The night Kai's anger boiled over is one I will never forget. He stood in the kitchen, shaking, shouting every resentment he had been storing for years. "You are a terrible mother. Everything is always about your pride, your morals, your strays, never about me." I cried. I cried because he was my son, and I had loved him with everything I had left. But I did not retract what I did for Emma. I knew right from wrong, even when it hurt, and he never forgave me. That was the night the distance between us stopped being a crack and became a canyon, one I could never cross again. Emma began visiting more often after that night. She noticed little things: how I flinched when the back door slammed, how I lowered my voice when Kai entered the room. She did not press me with questions. She simply watched with the quiet worry of someone who had once been a frightened child herself. A few days later, she brought 2 tiny cameras the size of buttons. She placed one in the kitchen facing the table and another angled toward the yard where the lavender grew. She did it quietly, but not secretly. She told me, softly, "These are just precautions, in case something happens when I'm not here." They never noticed the cameras Kai rarely cleaned. Melissa never paid attention to anything that did not benefit her, and Connor was too busy staring at his phone to look up. I didn't ask what Emma planned to do with the footage. I only knew that for the first time in years, someone was looking out for me. I should have known something was wrong the moment Connor walked outside with that grin, the one that never meant anything good. He pulled out his phone, propped it against the wooden fence, angled it toward me, and announced loudly, Watch this, guys. I'll show you the witch I live with. His voice carried an excitement that made my skin tighten, not because he scared me, but because I understood what humiliation meant to him: entertainment. Before I could react, he kicked at the ceramic pot near my feet, sending shards across the yard, then ground his heel into my lavender, as if he wanted to erase every memory tied to it. "Look at this useless, crusty old hag," he said, and his words hit harder than the broken pieces cutting into my sandal. "She is a parasite, a real one, lives off us like she deserves it." He did not look at me as a human being. He looked at me the way people look at pests, something they wish would disappear so they do not have to clean up after it. He glanced at the phone to check the viewer count, then laughed when the numbers rose. It was not the cruelty that shocked me, it was the ease of it. He did not hesitate, did not consider whether it was right or wrong. He simply enjoyed it. Kai stepped onto the patio, rubbing his forehead like I was the source of his headache, not his son's behavior. "Mom, just go inside if you do not want to hear it. Stop making it worse." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Making it worse? By standing? By existing? He looked at Connor, not with disapproval, not even concern, but as if his son's actions were a natural reaction to my presence. It was the unspoken permission that cut deepest. He wanted the spectacle to continue as long as it kept the blame away from him. Melissa followed, crossing her arms in that irritated way she always had whenever I occupied space she wished belonged to her. "If you just signed the house over already, none of this would happen. You are dragging this out." She said it loud enough for the phone's microphone to pick up, as though she wanted the world to believe she was the victim of my stubbornness. Her eyes drifted to the yard, not with anger or sadness, but calculation. She saw the house behind me, the land stretching farther than she deserved, and she saw a prize she felt entitled to. I could almost hear the math in her mind: what the land was worth, what selling it could solve for them, what having me gone would free them from. I glanced toward the fence line and noticed movement next door. Lynn Collins stood in her yard, holding a basket of folded towels. She froze when Connor shouted another insult, and for a moment our eyes met. Hers were wide, troubled. She had always been polite, always kept to herself, the type who offered a quick smile but rarely meddled in anyone's affairs. She did not step forward or call out, but she watched, and I knew she was taking in every word, every tone, every act. She saw the truth. That small acknowledgement was more mercy than anything inside my home had given me in years. Connor stomped closer, crushing more lavender with deliberate satisfaction. "Get a good look, everyone," he said to his audience. "She acts like she owns this place, but she is nothing. When she dies, I swear to God, we are bulldozing every inch of this dump." He turned back to me, eyes bright with misplaced confidence. "This will finally be my house." My hands trembled, not from fear, but from remembering every sacrifice they erased: double shifts to support Kai, lonely meals while Jack struggled to breathe, the boundaries my son twisted into cruelty. I remembered how easily he absorbed Melissa's contempt, how Connor once clung to my apron before learning to sneer. That tenderness died long before this night. The trembling stopped, replaced by a cold, steady clarity, the kind that comes when you stop explaining and finally see people for who they are. 3 generations bound by entitlement stood before me, waiting for me to break, and something inside me whispered, "Enough." "Come on, old woman," he taunted. "Say something." I did not. I simply stared at him, memorizing his posture, the arrogance in the way he held his chin, the assumption that he would inherit what he had never respected. I watched Kai standing behind him, arms crossed, believing he was the authority in this house. I saw Melissa smirking, convinced the world was on her side. Inside my chest, the fear that had lived there for years loosened its grip. I realized they had already told me who they were. They had told me countless times. This moment was not new. It was simply louder, witnessed by strangers, and recorded on a camera they did not know was watching. When Connor shouted again, "When you die, this will finally be my house," his voice cracked with the force of his certainty. And in my mind, without speaking aloud, I answered him clearly. "This house has never been yours, and it will never be yours." Not now. Not ever. I turned away, not because I was defeated, but because the decision had already settled inside me. The line they crossed could never be uncrossed. And the consequences, quiet, steady, and inevitable, had already begun unfolding long before they realized I would no longer bend. Night has a way of making small sounds louder, heavier, as if darkness wants you to feel every breath, every movement, with more weight than daylight allows. I was standing at the stove, waiting for the kettle to whistle, thinking I might sleep better with a cup of chamomile, when the peace of the kitchen shattered. The back door slammed so hard, the frame rattled, and before I could turn, Kai marched in with Melissa close behind him and Connor sealing the entrance like he was guarding a crime scene. Papers and folders dropped onto the table with a sound that felt like a slap. Kai did not bother with greetings. He jabbed a finger at the mess he had thrown down. "Mom, sit. We need to talk." The command in his voice was unmistakable. Not a request, not concern. Expectation. Authority he believed he had earned simply by being my son. I did not sit. But I moved closer, enough to see forms half pulled out of envelopes, a pen, and documents stamped with legal language. My stomach tightened with the kind of dread that arrives before you can find the logic behind it. Kai pulled out a chair with unnecessary force, scraping the wood sharply against the floor. "Here," he said. "You are going to want to sign these." Melissa stepped around him with her arms folded high on her chest, chin tilted the way she always did when she was about to push a narrative. "We are trying to help you," she said, and her voice dripped with false sympathy. "But you keep refusing to listen." Connor leaned against the counter, phone in hand, smirking as if he was watching a show he had already predicted the ending to. The kettle whistled behind me, but I did not turn it off. The air felt tight enough without silence. Chai slapped the top page with his palm. "This," he said, "makes me the financial guardian. It lets me manage the house, bills, everything. You are old, Mom. You cannot handle this anymore. You need someone responsible to take over." He pushed the pen toward me. "Let me handle it." My age. That was always the argument. Not my health, not my ability, not my clarity, my age. As if numbers on a calendar determined whether my judgment was sound. Melissa stepped in before I could answer. "Do you want us to end up homeless? Is that what you want? Because that is what you are risking by refusing to cooperate." She moved closer, her tone sharpening. "You will be dead soon anyway. Why do you need a house?" I looked at her, and for a brief moment, she actually flinched. Not because I threatened her, I never had, but because she saw something in my eyes she did not expect recognition. I finally saw her fully, not as a struggling woman trying to fit in, not as someone who misunderstood me, but as someone who wanted something that did not belong to her and would do anything to take it. Connor pushed himself off the counter and walked toward me with a swagger that did not belong on someone who had never earned anything in his life. He grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to bruise but hard enough to warn, and he shoved the pen into my hand. "Sign it, you rotten hag," he hissed near my ear. "We are all waiting." The kettle screamed, steam billowing upward, filling the kitchen with a harsh whistle that somehow felt like it matched the moment. My hand trembled. Not from fear, but from something far older and deeper, the realization that my own blood saw me as an obstacle, not a mother. I looked at the pen, at Connor's hand gripping mine, then at Kai, whose expression was twisted with frustration, and Melissa, whose eyes gleamed with anticipation. I gently pulled my hand back, placing the pen on the table with deliberate slowness. "No," I said. The room froze. They had expected tears, compliance, maybe even pleading, not calm refusal. I met Kai's eyes. "I am still aware enough to know what I am doing." My voice did not shake, it did not rise, it settled into the space between us like a final stone closing a wall. "And I will not sign away my life, because you three tell me to." Kai's face contorted, his illusion of moral superiority cracking. "You never listen," he snapped. "Not once in your life have you listened when it mattered." He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the stack of papers. Melissa stepped back as if preparing for a performance. Fine, she said, but when everything falls apart, do not expect us to save you. Connor laughed under his breath, shaking his head like I was an idiot. She is not listening now, and she never will. Then, lowering his voice, he muttered, maybe she needs something serious to wake her up. And somewhere else in town, at that same moment, Emma sat in her apartment watching footage she had collected for weeks, her hands shaking as she pressed pause when she saw a bruise on my shoulder in the frame. She replayed Connor's insults, Kai's accusations, Melissa's manipulations. She saw enough. She sent everything, every clip, every timestamp to Belton Dawson with a message that read, "It is happening again. She needs help now." Then she sent the same files to Officer Daniel Brooks, attaching her statement. She called Lynn Collins and told her, "I need you to be ready. Someone has to speak." None of them knew that their actions that night would change everything. Back in my kitchen, Kay leaned close enough that I could smell the sourness of his anger. "If you will not let us help you," he growled, "then do not blame us for what happens next." He gathered the papers violently, shoving them back into the folder. Connor snorted, shoved his hands into his pockets, and said, "Maybe the house will burn before you die. Accidents happen." He meant it as a threat, a careless one, but a threat all the same. I looked at each of them, one by one, and felt something inside me settle like a door clicking shut. They thought they were tightening a trap. They thought they were pushing me into a corner, stripping away my choices until I had none left. But what they did not understand, what they had never bothered to learn, is that I had already prepared for this. Every document they wanted from me was buried under the lavender they hated so much. Every attempt they made to break me was being watched by eyes they did not know were there. And every cruel word they spoke that night brought us closer to a moment that would unravel their entire scheme. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. Connor did not wait long before turning the whole thing into a performance again. Even after the argument over the papers, he still had enough energy to restart his little show, as if humiliating me once in the afternoon had not been enough entertainment for one day. He grabbed his phone, flipped the camera toward me, and moved around the kitchen like a predator looking for the angle that would make me look the smallest. "Guys, look at this," he said, forcing a laugh that never reached his eyes. "She refuses to sign anything. She is losing it. Watch this freak out." He zoomed the camera closer to my face as if I were a spectacle, not a woman who had raised him before he could tie his own shoes. He shouted things just to hear the sound of his own cruelty. "Crazy old witch," he muttered. "She cannot do anything right, not even die on time." Kai stood behind Connor with his hands on his hips, annoyed not at his son's cruelty but at me for enduring it. Melissa leaned against the counter, arms crossed, glaring as if my existence disrupted her comfort. Connor kept spewing insults, louder and uglier, and Kai let it happen because he believed it served him. What they did not realize was that Connor's live stream had reached strangers who recognized elder abuse. One viewer reported it. At the same time, Emma sat miles away reviewing footage from the cameras she had installed. She saw Kai blocking my path, Melissa shouting inches from my face, Connor taunting me, and the bruise I tried to hide. She sent everything to Officer Daniel Brooks, who opened it within a minute, recognizing me as the woman who once saved his daughter's life. He immediately sought emergency authorization and contacted the lawyer he trusted most, Belton Dawson. Meanwhile, Connor shoved the camera in my face, waiting for me to break. I stayed silent. Silence unsettled them, and they never understood why. The knocking on the front door was not a light tap. It was firm, authoritative, and final. Kay groaned loudly, annoyed, and stomped toward the hallway. "Who is bothering us at this hour?" he muttered. When he yanked the door open, his irritation dissolved instantly. Officer Daniel Brooks stood there in uniform, broad shoulders filling the doorway. Beside him was Belton Dawson carrying a folder so thick it looked like it could anchor a ship. Kai tried to straighten himself, then forced a grin that cracked at the edges. "Officers," he began, "is there a problem?" "Yes," Brooks said calmly. "We received a report of elder abuse. We also received several videos documenting ongoing harassment and coercion inside this home. He stepped forward, not aggressively, but with a certainty that left no room for argument. We need to speak to Catherine Miller. Kai's hand twitched on the doorknob. This is a misunderstanding. No, Brooks said. It is not. They walked past him without waiting for permission. Connor lowered his phone when he saw uniforms in the doorway. His smirk faltered. Melissa's eyes widened. Kai swallowed hard, suddenly quiet in his own house. Brooks looked straight at me, and for the first time that day, I felt the tightness around my ribs loosen. "Mrs. Miller," he said gently, "are you all right?" Before I could answer, Connor blurted out, "She is crazy. She is making everything up." His voice cracked under pressure, the bravado gone. "Enough," Brooks said, sharply. But Connor could not stop. Cruelty is a habit, and habits are hard to break. He pointed at me and shouted, "You crazy old witch! You ruined my life!" I turned to him, my voice low but steady. "It was not me. You did that to yourself. And you forget something, dear. I am old, but I am not deaf." He froze when he noticed Belton Dawson behind the officer, placing documents on the table with methodical precision. Belton looked at Kai, then Melissa, then Connor, the way a surgeon studies a wound. "This," Belton said, sliding the folder open, "is the footage recorded inside this home." He lifted another set of papers. "Here are written statements from your neighbor, Lynn Collins." He placed down a final sheet. "And this is the guardianship application Kai attempted to file, without Catherine's consent, filed 3 days ago." Interesting timing. Melissa made a strangled noise in her throat. Kai's face drained of color. Connor's phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a clatter. Kai tried to speak, then stopped. The words would not form because the truth had finally wrapped around him like a chain he could no longer wiggle out of. Brooks turned back to me, carefully, respectfully, as if I were someone who finally mattered again. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "you are safe now." Safe. A word I had not felt in a long time. I did not scream. I did not point fingers. I did not say the many things I had carried inside me for years. I just let out a long breath, the kind that feels like something leaving your soul. "Jack," I whispered under my breath. Someone finally heard. The conference room smelled faintly of stale coffee and polished wood, the kind of scent that makes people sit straighter without knowing why. I walked in with Emma beside me, her hand steadying my elbow, though truthfully it was my spirit she was holding up more than my body. Around the long table sat every person whose presence had pulled this story toward its breaking point. Kai, stiff-backed with false confidence. Melissa, arms crossed, already defensive. Connor, slouched low, trying to glare but unable to meet my eyes. Officer Brooks, calm and solid. Lynn Collins, quiet but resolute. Rosalind Hewlett, professional and unreadable. And, at the head of the table, Belton Dawson, the one man I trusted to untangle everything that was about to happen. Rosalind opened a folder, her voice clear and even. "Mrs. Miller, thank you for coming. I am here to discuss the Greenway expansion project. After recent geological reviews, the city determined that your land includes a protected water vein that must be preserved. Because of this, the city will need to acquire your property." Kai's head shot up. Melissa straightened so quickly her chair squealed. Connor jolted like someone had slapped him. Rosalind continued calmly. "The compensation value is estimated at $487,000. For a moment, the entire room changed temperature. Kai's eyes widened before narrowing, calculating. Melissa's jaw slackened. Connor's eyebrows flew upward in disbelief. They looked at each other, then at me, as if I had been hiding treasure in my apron pocket. Kai leaned forward, attempting a soft smile that did not suit him. "See, Mom, now we can all benefit. This is exactly why we needed to take care of the paperwork. We can make this work for everyone." Melissa immediately chimed in, tapping the table with her manicured nail. "Yes, we need to discuss shares. There is no reason to complicate this. We are a family." Their eagerness was almost pathetic. They had spent years tearing the foundation out from under me, but the promise of money brought them crawling forward as if affection could be revived on command. They did not know that this was the moment their fantasies would end. Belton cleared his throat and opened a binder thicker than any book on the table. Before we discuss the city offer, we must address the will. He spoke with the calm authority of someone who had seen every kind of greed, every kind of betrayal, and no longer found any of it surprising. Kai flinched. Melissa tensed. Connor sat up straighter. Belton continued. Mrs. Miller drafted her will 3 years ago while in full cognitive health. We have medical confirmation and a time-stamped video of the signing. He pushed the binder toward Kai. This is the official, legally recognized document. He began reading. The house, the land, and the majority of financial assets shall be inherited by Emma Reyes. The silence that followed felt almost physical, as if the air itself pressed down on the table. Belton went on. A portion of the assets will be donated to the Elder Protection Network. As for Kai Miller, Melissa Miller, and Connor Miller, there is no inheritance designated. Melissa exploded before Kai could stop her. This is fraud. She is senile. She does not know what she is doing. Belton lifted a remote, clicked a button, and a video played on the wall screen. There I was, 3 years younger, clear-eyed, speaking firmly as I signed the will. A doctor stood beside me, confirming my mental competency. Melissa's outrage faltered, her mouth hanging open like a door unlatched by a strong wind. Kai rose to protest, but Officer Brooks raised a hand. Mr. Miller, I would advise you to speak carefully. You are currently under investigation for elder abuse. Speaking out of anger will not help you. Kay slowly sank back into his chair. Lynn Collins finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. I heard them, many times. I heard them call her a burden. I saw them push her aside. I heard the yelling, the insults. She did not imagine any of it. Her words carried more weight than she seemed aware of. She did not embellish, did not dramatize, she simply told the truth. Then came the unraveling. Belton laid out the IOUs Kai had written, the guardianship application he had attempted to file behind my back, the video Emma submitted of Connor's threats, Melissa's taunts, Kai's orders. He explained that the city's payment would be issued solely to the legal owner, me, and consequently, my appointed heir. Kai's face crumpled as the reality set in. His past misconduct at work was being reviewed. With this scandal, any remaining opportunity evaporated. He would be held financially liable for every unpaid debt he had tried to bury. Melissa's eyes filled with panic. She would face charges as an accomplice. Her own mother had refused to let her move back in. Emma told me this privately, and with no income of her own, her luxury homemaker identity vanished. Connor was informed that the school board had already suspended him. His record now included juvenile offender elder abuse. He would be mandated to complete a year of community labor and barred from contacting me for 3 years. The moment demanded something, and I knew it was my turn. I looked at Kai first. I did not destroy your future. You just hated that I would not lie for you. He swallowed, unable to answer. I turned to Melissa. I never looked down on where you came from. You did. That shame was yours long before you met me. Her face twisted, anger melting into humiliation. Then Connor. The boy I once carried, who used to fall asleep on my shoulder. I held you when you were still small enough to fit in one arm, and you chose to believe the worst of me because it was easier than thinking for yourself. He could not look at me. I stood, placing my hand on Emma's arm for support, though truly, her presence alone steadied me. Let us go, I said softly. Our home is no longer here. Emma guided me toward the door. Behind us sat 3 faces drained of color, faces stripped of entitlement, stripped of certainty, stripped of everything they believed they were owed. Money, reputation, control, future, all gone. And none of it was taken from them. They lost it themselves. Here is a 120-word condensed version, keeping the emotional tone and clarity. The day I left the house I had lived in for nearly 40 years, the sky was the same gray as the morning Connor threw garbage at my feet, but the air felt lighter, almost freeing, like coming up for breath after being underwater too long. Emma stood beside me while I packed a small suitcase, the one Jack and I once traveled with. I took only clothes, a few photographs, and a dried bundle of lavender he planted long ago. Everything else, memories sweet and bitter, I left behind. At the edge of the yard, I stopped and looked back one last time. The kitchen window, where Jack and I once shared quiet mornings, the door Kai slammed in anger. The garden where my heart was bruised more than the soil. The lavender bundle trembled slightly in my hand as I whispered, "You buried yourselves in your own cruelty. And I finally get to walk out of the grave you dug for me." The wind carried the words away, and for the first time in years, I felt like they did not linger around my ankles, trying to pull me back. Emma drove us to her small house on the other side of town. It was nothing extravagant, 2 bedrooms, a narrow porch, a kitchen painted sunflower yellow, but it felt warm the moment I stepped inside. She had prepared a room for me, made up the bed with soft sheets, placed a vase on the dresser even though it held no flowers yet. "You can breathe here," she said quietly. And I did. For weeks after leaving, I simply rested. I slept without fear of footsteps, brewed tea without shouting in the background, and tended a small patch of dirt behind Emma's house, planting the lavender I carried with me. I thought I had lost the desire to grow anything, but the soil welcomed me like an old friend. Emma and I began building something neither of us had known as children: safety. She proposed turning an empty lot into a community garden for elders and children. We received permission and started planting. Lynn Collins often joined us, bringing seeds and lemonade, her quiet smiles feeling like affirmation. "One thing's for sure," she said once while patting my shoulder, "this garden finally belongs to the right woman." Her warmth made my chest ache in the best way. My life could have stayed quiet, but life has a way of circling back to what needs healing. One afternoon, Officer Brooks visited the garden, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me with a respectful nod. "A group downtown is organizing an elder protection workshop," he said. "They want you to speak. Your story, it could help people." For a moment, I hesitated. I had no desire for pity. But then I remembered the bruise Emma had seen, the way my own voice trembled when I spoke on the phone, the thousands of older adults who suffer alone because they believe suffering is expected of them. "I will go," I said. When I stood before that crowd, I did not recount every insult or every moment of humiliation. I did not talk about revenge or victory. I spoke of awareness, of patterns, of the subtle ways cruelty becomes normalized inside a family. I spoke so others might recognize the signs before it becomes too late. The audience listened, really listened, and afterward, several people hugged me with tears in their eyes. I had never felt so strangely powerful. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. I heard bits of news about my former family from neighbors or acquaintances. Kai had to start over entirely. The company reviewing his past misconduct concluded he violated several policies, leaving him with a tarnished reputation and no job prospects. Melissa bounced between temporary work and spare couches. Even her own mother refused to let her move in. "You did this to yourself," she reportedly told her. And Connor spent hours each day picking up trash in public parks while wearing a bright vest labeled community service. He was banned from social media during his probation, a punishment he felt far more than the physical labor. Their consequences did not bring me joy. They simply felt fitting, natural, like gravity finally pulling things back where they belonged. Months passed before Emma gently suggested we visit the old property. "Just to see it," she said. "To close the circle." I agreed. When we arrived, the land was almost unrecognizable. The house was gone, demolished for the Greenway project. The earth had been leveled, leaving only faint traces where walls once stood. A few stones remained, scattered like fragments of a life long finished. I stepped onto the cleared ground slowly. Emma stayed a few steps behind, giving me space. The air was cool and quiet, not mournful, just still. I knelt down and placed the dried lavender at the corner where the backyard used to begin. My fingers pressed the stem into the soil. "The trashy garden you told me to bury myself in," I murmured. "It is where I buried my old life instead, and where a new one grew." The wind carried the scent of crushed grass, and I closed my eyes, letting the moment settle inside me like the last piece of a puzzle finding its place. As we turned to walk away, I felt a clarity that I had not felt in years. I did not win because I gained money. I did not win because they lost something. I won because I found myself again. In the quiet of my thoughts, almost like a final narration to a story I never planned to tell, I whispered, "I did not triumph because I became richer than them. I triumphed because I remembered who I was, even when my own family forgot." When I look back now, I do not see the cruelty first. I see the lavender. I see Emma's hand steadying mine. I see the road where my old house once stood, now open and bright, leading forward instead of trapping me behind closed doors. Life has a way of teaching us that not every ending is a loss. Some endings are an escape. Some endings are a doorway we should have walked through long ago. If my story reached you tonight, if it stirred something deep or hurt in a way that felt familiar, remember this: age does not make you weak. Quiet does not make you powerless. And the truth, once spoken aloud, can move mountains. It certainly moved mine. Thank you for sitting with me, for listening, for staying long enough to hear what so many people in my life tried to silence. And if you want more real stories like this, stories of memory, justice, and the quiet strength of women who have lived long enough to finally speak, then you are in the right place. Please subscribe to Grand Emma True Stories. Your support helps bring these voices into the light, voices that were ignored for far too long. I will be here on the porch, telling the next story when you are ready to listen.